So, we are talking about stress and relaxation today, and I think this is so timely as we're approaching the midpoint of the semester. I know it can be a little bit difficult to find the energy and the motivation to carry on when you have really hit the ground running in the fall semester, which tends to be really busy. And so, I think it's wonderful that you've carved out time today to join us to think about stress and how you can start incorporating some relaxation techniques into your everyday. So I like to include this image. I think when we think about relaxation for me, I also, kind of think of, many things, but definitely the beach for me. But when we think about relaxation, when someone tells us to relax, I think we oftentimes immediately tense up and feel stressed. And so we're going to talk about relaxation in a way that feels approachable and feels really personal to you. And so I'm not going to tell you to relax, but I'm going to give you some tools and some resources to help cultivate relaxation into your day. So again, this is our stress and relaxation techniques class. And while we'll talk about stress, we're going to talk more about the solutions because we always want to walk away with a really practical approach to how do we actually make this something that feels like we can attain the relaxation techniques that we so, crave right now. We need a little bit of a break. My name is Abby Horton, and I'm a registered nurse here at the university. I teach at the Capstone College of Nursing. I'm also a certified health and life coach. I'm a wellness ambassador and wellness class educator, and it's a privilege to be able to be with you all today. So our objectives for the course, other than learning the basic concepts and definitions of stress and health, it's really to look at the relationship between health and wellness and to explore the importance of self-care, and then to learn specific strategies to develop and support positive coping strategies. And so part of that will be the relaxation techniques that we talk about at the end of the presentation. So when we think about stress, it's also important to think about our mental health and, when it's time to seek help. And so if you have, any of these bullet points here that you're experiencing, like feeling overwhelmed and really, unusually sad or angry or just not yourself, or if you're using unhealthy coping mechanisms, if you've lost someone or something important to you, or you've had a major trauma or major life event, or if you've stopped doing things that you normally enjoy and past coping mechanisms or strategies haven't helped you, it may be time to seek professional help, and that might be in the form of your, you know, um, primary care provider, or it might be a licensed mental health professional like a counselor. But we just want to encourage you to seek help if you feel like that you need a little additional support. And then there are many ways that you can actually seek help, especially as an employee of the University of Alabama. And so we've listed some here for you, but the EAP resources that are provided through American Behavioral are really helpful. There's also a 24/7 wellness support chat available through American Behavioral. And then if you log into your member login, you can actually access a list of resources and potential providers. And then of course you have the newsletter that's sent out via the HR development email listserv, and that will give you lots of resources and different points of connection if you need some additional support. So sometimes our brains feel like this, we have this burst of creativity over here on the right, and then the left, more analytical side of things, we're constantly kind of going back and forth between these two filters, and we can feel really overwhelmed, and we can feel like, we're on overload. And so what I would say to this is make sure that when you're thinking about how to actually reframe your stress that you're experiencing every day, make sure that you're thinking about how your brain functions best, because our brains are, really fancy computers that are meant to process information and secondarily to store information. But our brains don't do a great job of long-term storing information about things that we need to revisit often. And so it's so important that when we think about stress, that we not only think about how to reduce our stress and our triggers and the amount of stress that we're exposed to, but it's also, really important that we think about how we can best utilize the things that, we already have at hand. So, whether it's time blocking or calendaring or, planning out your day or developing a system, because you're not going to be able to avoid stress completely, but you can reduce the impact of the stress on your lives. And so a lot of the stress that I'm hearing from people is about really overwhelm and overload. There's too much on our plates right now, and it's because we're overwhelming our brain's ability to process and then store and then retrieve that information. And so while I usually don't talk about some of the things like time blocking, scheduling, calendaring, planning in this talk, I'm going to mention a few things today because I think that will give you, some really good tools to start with changing your life and changing, kind of your plan of attack for each week. Then the other part of the presentation is really going to look at relaxation techniques, which is how are you taking care of yourself really well when you are exposed to stress. And so we're going to have a two-prong approach today. So I want to really think about controlling what I can control. And I want you to think about that as well. There's so much in our lives that we don't feel like is in our control. And certainly that is true of 2020. And so when we think about controlling what you can control, you have to really kind of jot down and self-reflect on, what is it that is within my control, that I don't have to depend on anyone else. This is solely in my control. And, here are some really good ways to reframe that. So the goal isn't to get rid of all of your negative thoughts and feelings. That's impossible. The goal is to just change your response to them. And so that is what I have to use to remind myself that if I am interacting with my world, I am going to have stress. And so the goal is not to completely eliminate negative thoughts or feelings. It's not to eliminate stress because that's not possible. But the goal really is to change how I respond and react and think about my stress. And then to not worry about what I can't control. And then to remind myself of the things that are within my control, like my attitude, my actions, my behavior, what I eat, who I follow on social media, who I unfollow. That certainly could be true of our news. A lot of people are getting really overwhelmed and flooded with emotion by watching the news right now. And so you have to balance out your desire to be informed and your desire and really need to be able to, take a break from so much news right now. You can control how you react. You can control the personal boundaries that you set and how you speak to yourself and how you speak to others. And so I think that's a great visual reminder of the things that are within our control. And certainly there could be more, but those are the big ones that I want to touch on today. And then I have a good friend and coach in my life coaching, health coaching world. While we are coaches, we also have coaches. And a good friend of mine says, control what you can control and then fix your focus. Because what we focus on is really what manifests in our lives. And so fixing your focus looks like, honing in on the things that matter and the things that you can control. So there are some things that you can control that really in the grand scheme of things don't matter. Simple things, silly things that we sometimes get upset about. It might be, a spilled drink at dinner or a broken plate, or it might be, an email that had a typo in it. Those are things that you can control sometimes, but that, aren't really significant in the grand scheme. And then there are things that matter that you can't control. And so you really want to focus on the things that matter and the things that you can control. And so that little last, kind of visual or graphic is a Venn diagram, which I'm a fan of. And, where it meets in the middle, the things that matter and the things that you can control, where those intersect, that's what you should focus on. And so that's always an important reminder to me for someone that, really gets lost in the details or gets overwhelmed easily. That can be a great visual reminder of, really fixing your focus and controlling what matters. So when we think about stress, stress can mean a lot of different things. And so, basically we're just looking at it being a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And I would say that we probably have all experienced stress in 2020 and certainly probably before that. We are usually going to experience stress every day. And so, how we manage that is really important. And so stress is just the body's autonomic, and an automatic response to any physical or mental demand on it. And so your autonomic nervous system is going to automatically react to stress, whether it's a physiological stressor, meaning that, a dog is chasing you in your neighborhood on your walk, that's going to be a physiological stressor because your body feels like it's in danger. Or whether it's a more psychosocial or mental stressor, like maybe, I tell my students, maybe if they've gotten, an unsatisfactory grade, or, maybe you got an email that was really upsetting to you, that can be, more of that mental and emotional response. And so either way, our bodies, will respond the same way with adrenaline and cortisol and those hormonal responses to stress. And so when we say that we're flooded, we're really flooded with emotion, but we're also physically flooded with those hormones and chemicals that are responding to stress, trying to prepare our bodies for the stressor that we're facing. And so we can have this, typical fight or flight response where either we are gearing up to fight off, or, kind of attack whatever is, causing us danger or stress. And so it's that saber-toothed tiger example that we always hear about, during, primitive and prehistoric days, where a saber-toothed tiger would come up and our bodies would either, flood us and prepare us to fight off the saber-toothed tiger or to run from it. And we'd have to assess which was better, which was safer for us to do. And so we have that response elicited, and it's a primal thing that we do. And our bodies are constantly under stress now. And so we can't tell the difference between, a test or a bad evaluation or a stressful email, or, maybe someone dropping something at dinner and breaking it. Our bodies can't process the difference between those. And so we respond kind of in our default response, however we learned to respond as we were growing up during those, formidable years. And so we also sometimes freeze, and we don't think about that as being a common response, but it is really very common for people to just feel paralyzed and not know how to respond. And so we call that, freezing. And so we don't run and we don't fight. We just feel a little paralyzed. And that's what I see a lot of people facing right now, is they're not quite sure what to do. And so rather than making any decision, they just feel stuck. They'll say that I feel stressed and overwhelmed and overloaded, and I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. That's really the freeze response to stress. And, while we're, in this kind of 6 month journey of, experiencing this pandemic, we're at the point of 6 months where if you haven't adjusted to the stress that you're facing right now, you are starting to get exhausted mentally and physically. You have used up, most likely, your reserves to be able to respond, from that adrenaline rush that you get when something new is happening. And so, now that we're talking about new normals and we're having to do things differently, many of us are now transitioning back into the office. There's lots of things that, we're having to cope with, and we're recognizing that this isn't a temporary situation. And so, we know that we've got to really change some things that we're doing. And so if you're starting to feel like you were handling the stress you had in March and April and May better than you are now, it's just because most likely you haven't taken time to really pour back into yourself and adjust mentally or physically to a lot of the changes that you've been asked to make this year. And so just recognize that that is a typical response and that there's nothing wrong. It just means that you might need to adjust a few things. And so hopefully we can help you with that today. So moderate levels of stress are actually important to improve your performance and efficiency. And, I don't like to use the words good and bad to describe anything related to health, because, nothing is inherently good and nothing is inherently bad. we assign that meaning to words and to experiences. And so stress isn't good or bad. Stress is just necessary. It's just a necessary part of life, because without stress, we're not going to be motivated and disciplined to do the things that we need to do. And so a little bit of stress is good, in air quotes, and is needed, because we have to have that to be able to function. And it actually is a protective mechanism for us, because if we weren't stressed when we saw a saber-toothed tiger or maybe the unfriendly dog in the neighborhood, we wouldn't, actually respond to protect ourselves, and we might be, having to face a really unfortunate situation because our bodies didn't respond accordingly. So I hope that that will help you reframe stress. So stressors, y'all probably have your own unique list of stressors, but I put some really common ones here. Work-life balance certainly is more, difficult and challenging this year. Family responsibilities, social distancing, business and school closures and reopenings, certainly that's happening right now and with our school systems in many businesses, and so that's a change. We might have financial concerns or, childcare and schooling concerns for ourselves and for, our children, and for people who maybe, are working with us, that may alter some of your responsibilities. And so that can be a challenge. Caregiving responsibilities for older adults might be an issue for you. Maintaining your close relationships certainly has been challenging in this, era of social distancing, which I really like to think more of as physical distancing, because we can still stay socially connected. You might be concerned about, your health and illness concerns. Certainly, concern or worry that you might, become sick, or you might have a pre-existing condition that is concerning to you. You also, have maybe environmental or living concerns. There might be people living with you who ordinarily wouldn't be because of the pandemic. And then just the overall sense of uncertainty. And so that is what is often so difficult about the unknown, is that we don't know how to prepare. And our brains really love to know what to expect. And that's why we will repeat unhealthy behaviors and habits over and over and over again, because our brains know what to expect. So even if we know that eating something unhealthy is going to make us, not feel great the next day, our brains would rather do that than to do something new, because the uncertainty is more, scary and you're more fearful than if you were to do something new that actually might be better for you. I'm going to check the chat. I see a question. Okay. All right. So yes, there's a concern about your connection. Yes, you will get your credit. You're logged on and you can always go back and watch the replay. So think about your personal stressors, and then think about your triggers. So your individual stressors and triggers are going to be different from anyone else on the call. And so you want to write down 3 to 5 of your triggers and think about how to avoid or limit your triggers. And so it's important that you think about, how you interact with the triggers in your day and how you can avoid or limit those as much as possible. And some are not going to be able to be avoided or limited. So we're going to talk about how you actually, will respond. And so think about self-care strategies, stress management strategies to help you cope. So if dinner time is a difficult time for you because you have a lot going on, maybe you have children, or maybe you just have a different schedule from, your spouse or partner, or it's just a busy time because you're transitioning from working to being at home, whether that means that you're working from home or you're commuting back home from campus. That can be a difficult time. So if you know that dinner is a time where you're really stressed, you can think about meal planning and prepping ahead of time, so that you're not having to actually cook dinner during that stressful time. So that's one way you can think about a strategy that would help you avoid or limit your trigger. And then you can decide how you'll respond when you are triggered. And so, if you know that dinner time is a stressful time, maybe you have young children, maybe you have teenagers, maybe you live alone, but maybe you're triggered by something during that dinner time hour, decide how you're going to respond. So, for me, I have young children, and oftentimes something gets dropped or spilled. And that can be really disruptive to the dinner time process. And so, if I know that it's likely that something's going to get dropped or spilled or broken during dinner, then instead of exhausting myself mentally and physically with getting upset or angry on top of that, I need to go ahead and kind of give myself a pep talk and mentally rehearse how I'm going to respond. Having, things in the kitchen to clean up the spill easily so you're not running to try to find a towel, or, whatever it may be. Think about your particular situation. If you already know how you're going to respond, you often will really, start to see your stress be reduced, because okay, when this thing happens, then I'm going to do this. And so that can really help you have a plan. It also helps your brain because it prepares your brain to know what to expect. And so it's eliminating that uncertainty of how is he or she going to respond when this happens. And so that can be really, really helpful. You also want to think about, the responses that you can have. So again, we talked about fight, flight, freeze, and you also can have face. And so that's where you actually are more emotionally connected, and you can actually face your fears. And so that's something that's important. So this is just kind of the 4 typical responses that you'll see. And so we certainly want to equip you to be able to face your fears and, face the challenges that you have. And oftentimes when we're stressed, we are really fearful. The underlying emotion there is that we're afraid that we're not enough, or that we're not going to be able to do, the best job. And so we're very fearful about the stress that we have. We're fearful that we can't actually cope with it. And so this is really important to think about, when you flee or you freeze, you're kind of disengaging. When you're fighting or facing your fears or your stressors, you're really engaging on a different level. And of course, facing the fear has the more positive connotation, because you're not in an angry mindset. You're really just trying to make sure that you're showing up as best as you can. So these are some other stress responses that we can talk about. Fawn or flop, that's where we try to just really avoid, the stressor that we might have. We might be a little bit in denial. We might try to make friends with the stressor. We might feel flooded, and, that can often accompany freezing. And then we might just be fatigued. We might just really retreat. So, the friend that, says that they can't go out for dinner, or they can't meet you on the weekend, that they're just too tired or overwhelmed. They may actually be so fatigued that they just need to really retreat to their house, or, to their bed to recover. And so these are some more typical stress responses that we don't often, explore, but those can be ones that, people are just kind of in a default mode, that they have their way that they respond to stress. And it's really therapeutic if they can actually walk through their typical stress response, unless it's unhelpful, and then we can actually work to change that. I see a hand raised. If you have a question, you're welcome to unmute. Okay. So managing stress, we see physical health improvements and emotions really stabilize when we are able to manage our stress well. And so we'll have improved energy and stamina. We'll have a more positive attitude and be more hopeful and happier. We also improve our ability to focus. And so our ability to learn and to achieve really improves when our stress is managed well. And so when our brains are, being bombarded with fear and overwhelm and stress and hormones and all of that, our brains are not going to work well. And so we are going to lose sleep. We are going to forget things. We are going to respond in more unhealthy ways, because we're just so tired and overwhelmed. And so being able to manage your stress is super important to being able to, kind of live the life that you want, and be able to manage, your daily task really well. So I always like to say that you might need a permission slip to put yourself and your health first. And so it's okay to say no. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to carve out time for yourself and to do the things that make you feel good. And so if you're one of those people like me who need a little bit of permission to do those things for yourself, then definitely take this as this permission slip. So we want you to really feel good about prioritizing your health and your well-being. So we're going to go through the 4 C's. And so the first C is to cultivate calm. And so, again, when you're facing stress, you just want to acknowledge your feelings. Know that it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel stressed out. You may need to take breaks from the news or social media. You may need to offset your stress with, positive and calming activities. You certainly want to remain hopeful and optimistic. You want to plan and prepare for the unexpected as best you can, but you certainly don't want to go overboard. And so again, you might, meal plan and grocery shop and, have a plan laid out for your next week. That's a really practical way to cultivate calm so that you're not constantly looking for something or having to make, multiple decisions a day. You can decide on your outfit for the day. You can decide on your plan for the day and what you're going to eat all before the day happens. And so you wake up with renewed energy because you know what to expect for the day. So those are some examples of how to create or cultivate calm. And then you want to connect. We can still be social while social distancing. And so we're really just physically distancing. And so, FaceTiming, calling or texting, mailing a card or a letter, using social media to stay in touch, using online resources that are now free because of COVID-19, hosting a virtual dinner party or play date, checking in with your neighbors, or just taking walks in your neighborhood. Those are all great ways not only to connect to others, but to connect to yourselves. And so that's something that I would really encourage is figure out a way to cultivate calm, figure out a way to stay connected, and then figure out a way to be creative. And so people who are usually overwhelmed with stress and who have anxiety, we all have a little bit of anxiety. That doesn't mean we have a clinical diagnosis, but it does mean that we, do experience anxious thoughts from time to time. Everyone experiences that at some point. And so people who have anxiety typically are really creative people because when we're having anxiety, we're really telling ourselves a story about why we should be nervous or scared or anxious without always having a reason. And certainly there's definitely genetic and physiological and chemical imbalances that can lead to anxiety, but there is also a component of perception and mindset as well. And so we certainly don't want to negate the chemical imbalances and things that can lead to anxiety or stress or any sort of mental health concern. But sometimes creativity is what is needed to help relieve some of the stress and anxiety that we're feeling. Even if it's just like low-lying, low-level anxiety and stress, creativity can really help. And so, painting, drawing, doodling, daydreaming, playing, making music, listening to music, those are all some great ways to be creative. And so we are really designed as humans to create and to produce. And so oftentimes when people say that they're stressed or stuck or that they're feeling overwhelmed or they feel like they've plateaued or they've stalled in some way, it can be just really that they are creatively blocked and they need an outlet. And so if you don't have a hobby, if you don't have something that you enjoy like a sport or something creative like this may be a great time for you to think about a fun, cheap, free way to be creative and to really use that energy towards something that feels really good to you and feels really life-giving and allows you to create. And it doesn't have to be creativity in the traditional sense of, a paintbrush and paints, but it could be any number of things. And so those are great outlets for you to create and to use that extra energy. And so I would really encourage that. Creativity is so important to our overall sense of wellness and well-being. And then the last is to cope. And so the last C is coping. We want to use positive coping strategies for stress management. So we want you to be mindful of how you normally cope with things. What's your default setting on coping? Definitely self-reflect on your everyday stress and coping. Kind of make a menu of coping strategies to try and adjust as needed. So trial and error is often needed for you to figure out what works best for you. And just to know that that's going to change from day to day. So how you cope in one area of your life may be different than how you cope in a work setting or a home setting. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself permission to adjust as often as you need to and to try out different things, because you never know what's going to be the best fit for you in terms of, an exercise plan or, a good, nutrition plan. There's just so many things that make those plans individual, that you may have to try several things before you find something that really works and resonates for you. So on the next slide and this slide here, I have some common coping strategies that are really helpful. And so, you always want to hit pause and rest and reset when you feel overwhelmed. And so oftentimes we think that we should just plow through. That's kind of the American value, to just push through, to just do it and keep on going. And sometimes action is needed. Sometimes when you feel stuck and you feel stressed, sometimes action is what's going to actually drive you forward. But then there are other times when you actually just need to, press pause and then rest and reset. So that might look like a nap. That might look like going to bed early. That might mean, mindful meditation or yoga or a walk around the neighborhood. But you have to realize, what is needed for you in the moment. And that might be action. That might be making a to-do list and crossing something off that list. Or it might be reaching out for help. But sometimes it's that you need to actually, pause, rest, and reset. So set realistic expectations, make things really manageable. Sometimes we make a to-do list and really it's a project list. It's going to take more than one step to actually get those things accomplished. Sometimes we avoid things, we procrastinate, and that's often about trying to achieve perfection. And so, think about those, times where you procrastinate, what are you avoiding? Usually it's a negative emotion, or it's the realization that you can't be perfect, so you don't want to do it right now. Set healthy boundaries. So many of these I could talk through with you, but it's important that you find something that helps for you. And so I've given you a lot of choices here and on the next slide for you to really think about what your menu could look like. And so, a menu of self-care or coping strategies would be you picking 3 or 5 of these to do when you feel stressed or overwhelmed or stuck the next time. And you just pause and say, okay, I'm going to look at my menu and see what can I do right now. And that might be that you stop and you write down 3 things that you're grateful for. It might mean that you stop and you call a friend. It might mean that you take a walk outside, the building or your neighborhood. And so there's lots of choices that you can do. It's just important that you pick something that is sustainable and effective for you. So when we think about the connection to health, we often think about health being about having a disease, or the absence of a disease. And what we really want to think about is that health is really the complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of a disease. And so this has been true from the World Health Organization as far back as 1947. And so, of course, they've certainly updated this, but I wanted you to see that, for a long time, we've recognized that health is important, and it's not just about not having a diagnosis. It's about really pouring into yourselves and taking good care of your bodies. And so we want to really think about how people define their own health and values and personality and lifestyle, and how we can help support that. So there's a wellness wheel that you can, reference here. There's many other variations of the wellness wheel, but I like to tell people to really think about where they're feeling stressed the most. Is it that an emotional need isn't being met? Is it that there's a social need not being met? That might be really true right now. Maybe you're not able to see your friends or family as much. Is there a physical need? Do you need to move your body more? Is there, an environmental or spiritual need? Is there an intellectual need not being met? Is it occupational? Are you having occupational stress related to your job? So there are so many different areas that we can have stress, and sometimes we have stress in all of the categories. And so pick one or two categories that needs your attention the most, and start making little steps toward changing kind of the narrative around your stress, and also to start eliminating some of those stressors and triggers that we mentioned earlier. Some of the wellness basics that I like to mention when people are feeling stressed and overwhelmed is really this, notion of 5 to thrive. And right now we're, doing the program through Wellbema, Strive for 5. And so this is a play on that. And this is a way for you to actually take care of yourself during stressful times. And so the reason the Start Here pin is on this slide is because when people are feeling overwhelmed, either with their health or their wellness, or they're on a fitness and weight loss journey, or they're just feeling stressed in general, I tell people to try these 5 things first. And I tell them to do it in this order. So sleep is foundational to health, and so try to get 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Try to, sleep in a cool and dark and quiet room. Try to make sure that you don't have any blue light exposure after 9 o'clock. Try to make sure that you, really make this, a ritual around sleep like you would do for a small child. We don't do that for ourselves as adults, but really take care of your body and make sure that you're sleeping well. Not just number of hours, but the quality of sleep that you have is good. Then you want to work on staying hydrated. So drinking half of your body weight in ounces daily, up to about 100 ounces is pretty typical, but you want to be safe with it. Everybody needs a different number of ounces of water a day. And so this is something that you want to track. You can definitely overhydrate, and that can be concerning and dangerous. So you don't want to drink too much water, but you want to make sure that you're getting enough. And the recommendation of 64 ounces is the traditional recommendation. That is often not enough for people to really feel hydrated. And so you want to kind of use that trial and error approach that we mentioned earlier. You also want to strive for a healthy plate. And so instead of having a diet mentality, you really want to think about just eating real food. And that's called the JERF approach, just eat real food. And so you want to really aim for about half of your plate being vegetables, and thinking about getting a carbohydrate and a protein at every meal along with a healthy fat. Because oftentimes when we're feeling stressed, we'll have fluctuations in our blood sugar. And if we don't have a good combination of a healthy fat, protein, and carbohydrate, especially a complex carb, then we're actually probably having some fluctuations in our blood sugar, and we can experience a lot of stress from that. And so, what we feel like is stress may just really be a low blood sugar. And so you also want to eat the rainbow. Make sure that you're eating colorful foods, not just beige and green and brown foods, that you're eating red, orange, yellow, all of the good healthy foods, blue, purple. Get all of those good colors in. You also want to move your body every day, and that might not be a formal exercise program. That might be just walking around your neighborhood. That might be yoga for 10 or 15 minutes at night or in the morning. That might be a dance party while you're waiting for your food to cook in the kitchen. There's so many different ways you can move your body. Our bodies are designed to move, and it actually will get those hormones out of our system. So if we get flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, taking a walk, crying if you need to, that's okay too. Those types of things are designed to get those chemicals out of your body and will really benefit you. And then meditation, I think, is so important. And people are really hesitant to meditate because they don't feel like they know how, or they imagine that it's really complicated and not approachable. They imagine someone wearing yoga gear and, sitting for, long periods of time, 45 minutes, crisscross applesauce on the floor, on a cushion, and being free of thought. And that is not often realistic for many people. That's great if that's what you enjoy and you can do that. But most people only have a few minutes a day. And so, 3 to 5 minutes using an app that has a guided meditation where you can sit in your office chair, or you can sit in your parked car and, listen to a meditation. 3 to 5 minutes is shown to be effective and helping really take care of your brain and helping you reset. So I think that sleep is for the body what meditation is for the mind. And so I think we need to give ourselves times of rest during the day. So many of us wake up and, after we've gotten up for the day, we're go, go, go until we go to bed at night. And we don't give ourselves time to transition or to kind of power down during our day. And so meditation can really be a great tool for that. And when you meditate, it's not that you're going to be free of thought, it's that you're letting thoughts come and go and that you're not, acting on those thoughts. And so again, like with the presentation, the goal is not to be free of stress. It's not to be free of thought. It's to be able to experience stress and experience thoughts and let it go and kind of move on with your day without it impacting you negatively. So these stacked stones are called cairns, and you see here that all of these stones are in balance, but the balance all looks different. And so finding balance looks different for everyone, and this is a great visual reminder that what works well for you may not work well for your partner or spouse, may not work well for your parent or your best friend or your coworker or your kids. And so just remember that it's okay that people are different and that what works for you and what helps you find balance, what helps you de-stress may not work for someone else and vice versa. And so when we think about, how do we find balance, Lisa Rankin has a really great TED Talk on the whole health Karen and her perspective on how you achieve balance and health. And so many times when we go to conferences or conventions or listen to TED Talks or podcasts or read self-help books or do personal development and engage, a lot of times we're looking for something outside of ourselves that is going to, quote unquote, fix the problem. And what Dr. Rankin really emphasizes in her TED Talk and in her books is that really the answers are inside of you. There might be, a nugget of information that you need to glean from a webinar like this, or, from, a TED Talk or something like that, or a self-help book. But the change that you're seeking is really within. And that all starts with really, self-reflection and working on mindset and trial and error. And so she has this whole health Karen, which is pictured over here on the right, where it has service and love and pleasure and gratitude. And she says that the bottom stone that is the Karen is your inner pilot light, and that's really the inner alarm system in your body that knows whether something is good or right or true for you, whether it resonates with you. And then she builds up to the point that physical health and mental health are the actual top two stones. And if you were to go and knock over the stacked stones over here on the left of this picture, likely the first two stones are going to be the ones that fall off first. And so that's her representation of when you have an issue with your balance in your life, that your physical health is going to be the first thing that shows signs and symptoms that there's something off balance, and then your mental health, and then it goes down kind of the different stacked stones. And so what she's saying is when we start to have headaches or physical symptoms or some mental health challenges where there's no underlying diagnosis, there are things that are happening to us to kind of give us clues that we need to look deeper at maybe what's going on with our stress or our wellness. And so I really invite you to check out her work if that's something that resonates with you and that feels like might be true for you. I certainly have enjoyed her work and feel like that it has been helpful in thinking about how to change our narrative around health and wellness and how to support people through stressful times. So some other coping strategies I've listed here as a checklist. And so again, these are things that you can incorporate and include in your day. And, I often tell people to really think about clearing your schedule for an hour and just sitting down and looking at your routines and rhythms and the things that you're saying yes to, the things that you're saying no to. What are your boundaries right now? What is important to you? What can you automate? What can you get help with? Oftentimes we feel like we have to do everything ourselves when there's ways that we can actually delegate or get help. And so there's definitely a lot of activities and things, tasks that you can do to get unstuck if you're feeling stressed. And so I would invite you to look at those. And then some other useful resources. I like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. If you're feeling really stressed and overwhelmed, you can just kind of close your eyes, push back from your desk and name 5 things that you can see in the room, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And that's a way to really recenter and kind of ground yourself. I also like this image of the bare feet on the grass. That is a way to really, practically ground yourself by getting outside in nature. There's, this theory about the exchange of positive and negative ions in the body and in the environment when you're outside on grass, or why we feel so great when we're at the beach because we're barefoot, and we're so often not barefoot anymore in our society when we're adults. So that's another practical way. Music is so therapeutic, so I really enjoy the Totally Stress Free Spotify playlist. So that's one that I think is really fun. Or maybe you can create your own. There's lots of ways to create your own Spotify playlist or whatever music channel you enjoy. There's also some free yoga channels like Yoga with Adrienne, and she has ones that are for pain and for stress relief and for, kind of winding down at night or waking up in the morning. She's got some really great ones for beginners and for those who are more experienced. And then there's lots of apps for meditation, including Headspace, which is pictured here. There's one called My Life, and there's one called Calm. And those are the 3 top meditation apps that I recommend to people. I've tried all 3, and I like lots of different options and features of all 3. And so, again, that would be a trial and error of which one that works best for you. And then the little, app that has an M in the center, that's called the Motivation app. And so this is an app that can send you a motivational quote or, passage, as many times a day as you want to set it. And so every morning at 9 a.m., I have an app notification that pulls up kind of a motivational quote or inspiring words. And so that's something that's really helpful to set the tone of the day. And it's a great reminder and kind of reset of, why I'm working on what I'm working on, what is meaningful for me, is to feel like that I am helping others. And so to have those inspirational quotes, it's just another way of pouring back into myself when I'm pouring out to others. And so those are some things that I have found to be really useful, not only for me, but for those that I work with in terms of life coaching and stress management. Mindful breathing is also really important. It's something that we don't talk about nearly enough. And so this is a YouTube channel that can talk about the importance of breath work and how to actually do this for relaxation. So when we talk really rapidly and quickly, we often get out of breath. I do this when I do these talks. I talk so fast to get all the information in, and then you feel really tired afterward. You may feel this way when you're having to wear, face masks or face shields for long periods of time. And so really working on, slowing your breathing down and being intentional can be helpful, particularly if you're working on your nutrition. Breathing and resetting your breath work before you eat is part of mindful eating. And so this is a great channel to find out more information about that. And this is going to be one of those techniques that help control your autonomic nervous system. And so, when you get an exciting or even not exciting email or news event that happens, and you feel a little breathless and you get excited and your heart flutters a little bit and you feel flooded with chemicals, when you're resetting your breathing through breath work and through this technique, you're actually telling your body to reset that experience. And so it helps get all of those hormones and things reset back to factory settings. So this is a good one to check out. And then Mel Robbins has her own 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And this is really about, her journey through depression. And she was having a difficult time getting up in the morning and not feeling like her life was going as planned. And so she was not getting up for the day and was really battling depression. And so she decided one day that she was going to pretend that she was a rocket ship and that she was going to blast out of bed. And so she does a lot of self-coaching. So she said, Mel, you're going to get up. And she closes her eyes and she says, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And she pretends to blast off out of bed. like she's a rocket. And she did that every day until she was able to get up without really needing that. But she kept using that technique. And then she wrote a book called The 5 Second Rule, and she has gone on to recreate her life and her career based on doing mindset work. And so this is kind of something that we do naturally anyway. If you're someone who's a little bit fearful of things, when you go to get on a roller coaster or go to do something scary, we kind of do this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, self-talk about it's okay, just get on the ride. And so that's something that you can apply to almost anything that you do. If you're scared or nervous or fearful, you just really say, okay, I'm just going to do it, and you count yourself down, and then you just do the next thing. And that can be a really great tool for someone who needs to get out of that feeling of being stuck. And then I have a great friend who is a licensed counselor, and she talks about how important it is to have something on the horizon to look forward to. And I think that something during the pandemic, other than the uncertainty, has been that we haven't had a lot to look forward to because we didn't know what we could plan or count on. And so this 2-2-2 rule is that every 2 weeks that you're going to go out for the evening, every 2 months you're going to go out for the weekend, and then every 2 years you're going to take an extended time out or vacation for a week. And so if that's not feasible, doing something that you enjoy once a quarter, something that is really life-giving and stress reducing once every 3 to 4 months, that can be really, really impactful for managing your stress, because we like to know what to expect and we like to have something to look forward to. And that's one reason why we really enjoy things like football season or the holidays or breaks, because we know that that's built-in fun for us. And so when we don't always feel like we have control over that, it can be really helpful to create little things like that to look forward to. And then a TED Talk that I always recommend on stress is this TED Talk called How to Make Stress Your Friend by Kelly McGonigal. And it's a really short TED Talk that really helps you reframe the kind of conversation around stress, and helps to really highlight the importance of making stress your friend and realizing that it's not good or bad, but that it's just necessary. So definitely check this TED Talk out. It's less than 20 minutes and it's really user friendly. And then I just like to encourage you, remember that when you're going to make changes, it's really about making habit changes. And so I do have a talk on habit change that's posted on the wellness website. If you haven't checked it out, you might want to. It has some really good practical tips, but just remember that when you're making changes, even the smallest of changes, it needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be something that you can do comfortably. And that's why diets don't work. That's why radical changes like, drastic, health and fitness programs don't work for most people. That's why we're not always able to change the amount of stress we experience, because we make drastic changes. We have this all or nothing mindset, and then we aren't able to actually maintain that or sustain that change. And so make slow, realistic changes in your life that feel really good to you, that work for you and your family. And then remember that slow progress is still progress. And so, work on changing one thing and then changing the next thing. And so it's all about, making, changes that are 1% better. And so if you're constantly doing things like that, with the mindset that you're just going to make a small change and then another small change, it really does add up over time. And before you know it, you'll look back on your journey and you'll be really surprised at how far you've come, because you just made one tiny change at a time. So we would love for you to follow us on all of our social media channels. Ashley's on the call today, and Ashley does a great job of managing all of the socials for Wellbema and for Wellness and Work Life. And so we do put out a blog for every class that we teach, and so there's a blog with additional information for you if you want to check that out. And then we do have some upcoming classes and programs, so definitely make sure that you look for the newsletters that the Wellness and Work Life office send out. And we would love for you to think about health coaching. So we offer health and life coaching for free, and that is a benefit as a UA employee. So if you have any interest in that, please feel free to email me at abby.horton@ua.edu for more information. And we have some time, so I will be happy to take questions, and I'll go to the chat. You can unmute, or you can pop it into the Q&A or the chat box. Yes, even if you logged in late, you will still receive credit. Okay. Are there any questions that y'all might have? So with the health coaching, we do 4 sessions, and it depends on if you're really wanting to focus on a health goal or a life goal. But we look at doing 4 free sessions, and the first session is just an interest session. And so we schedule those 30 minutes at a time, and we work through a list of goals and kind of what your needs are, and then we map out a plan together. And that's completely free for you. Thank you, Julie and Glenda. I'm glad this was helpful. And if y'all would like more information, you're welcome to email me and we can set up a time to talk. Thank you, Hope. I'm so glad this was needed. Okay, I see a question in the Q&A. Yes, we can see who is in the Zoom meeting, and Ashley is actually taking attendance, but it does record who all attends, so you don't have to be concerned about receiving credit. Hopefully that answered your question, but if not, you're welcome to ask again. If you would like to receive the PowerPoint, yes, we can send it out to you. If you'll just send an email saying that you want it so that we can reply back to you. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Carlene. Thanks for the sweet feedback. I appreciate that. Yes, the links will be in the PowerPoint. So if you would like that, we can just send it out to those who've registered. If that's okay with Ashley, we can just send out the list for everyone if that's something that y'all are interested in. And then the links will work, so you can just click on those. Absolutely. It looks like there's enough interest. I'm seeing another question in the Q&A. It looks like there's enough interest. We'll just send it out to everyone who's registered for the class. I think that'll be the most efficient thing to do. Great. Yes, well, I'm not claiming to be a rock star, Hope, but yes, the wellness and work life team are that it's a group full of rock stars. Ashley and Carolyn and Nikki are great. I'm happy to be a part of the team. Thank you, Celia. Thanks, Myra. Any other questions or things that I can do as we wrap up? I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. While I wait to make sure we don't miss a question. Oh, okay. It says, what advice do you have for when your triggers are checking email, but checking email is a main part of your job? That is so great. Yes, Hope, you can go ahead and log out if you want. That's perfectly fine. Yes, so emails are very triggering, and most of us have to actually check emails a lot. And so what I would suggest is time blocking your emails so that you're not constantly checking them, and to make sure that you don't have it set up where you're hearing the ding every time you receive an email, which is really the default on Outlook. And so you may need to stress, the importance of time blocking. And so you may need to set boundaries and say that you're going to actually only check emails on the hour. So at 9, at 10, because we often use our emails as a task list. And so when something comes in, we're responding immediately to the email. And some of the emails that we received it's actually really detailed in what we have to do. It's not just a simple reply. And so I would say, maybe you're going to check your emails twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon. It's going to look different for everyone, certainly. Some people have to check more often than that. But if you can set aside time where email is not something that you're constantly responding and reacting to, that will really help with it being a trigger for you. Also, doing meditations before, maybe you do a 3-minute meditation on an app before you actually go to check your email. And then maybe you actually do a 3-minute meditation after you check, and that will really help to reset. Oftentimes if I get an email that feels really stressful for me, I'll just close my email out. I'll sit quietly for just a minute or so, and then I'll get up and, go check my mailbox, or, go take a little bit of a break, go walk around my house or go walk around my office, and, just make sure that I'm getting my body moving, because for me, that really helps reset me. But yes, if you're constantly responding to the dings and bells and whistles on your computer, and you're having to manage emails that can be really stressful or stress inducing, you definitely want to have a plan in place and limit the number of times you're checking. And if people need you and it's an emergency, most of the time they're going to reach out and call you anyway. So I feel like for the most part, that's really helpful for most people. I hope that helped. If not, please feel free to reach out. Time blocking resources. Yes, I would just do a Google search and look to see what resonates with you, because everyone's going to be different. For me, what I do is I do a brain download every week of the things that are kind of weighing on my mind that are causing me stress. And then I actually take a sheet of paper and I actually just block out times of when I'm going to answer emails, when I'm going to prep classes, when I'm going to, make phone calls. I plan out my whole day. And I don't know if this will show up, but let me show you what I use. I actually have this little notepad right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's not very easily visible on this screen, but it actually has, a list of things that you can write down in terms of like times. So there's a time out beside each, and then there's a category for what's super important, and then what's, next most important. And so that's an item of 6 things. And then there's a little block down at the bottom that has something for notes. And so I take my to-do list that I make every week on Sunday evening, and I plug those things in so that every day I know that from 8 to 9 I'm doing this, and from 9 to 10 I'm doing that. And that can feel really restrictive to some people, but what I have found is it actually frees you up and gives you more time, because your brain knows what to expect. And so you're not constantly worrying about all of the things that you have to do. Sometimes when you just write down a to-do list, you don't ever actually feel better, because you haven't scheduled when you're going to actually do those things. And so your brain continues to worry about them. But if you take your planner or a sheet of notebook paper or a free printable online and you plan out your day with all of the things that is on your to-do list, then oftentimes you'll be more productive. And when you're resting and having family time or friend time or just, me time, you're actually in the moment. And when you're working and you're in the moment. So many times we're stressed because when we're at work, we're thinking about our personal lives. And when we're in our personal lives, in our downtime, we're thinking about work and all we have to do. So if you plan out all of those things, personal and, work, then you oftentimes can get some of that brain space back and feel less stressed. Christopher, if that did not help answer your question, feel free to reach out and I'll send some more tangible resources for you. Okay, I think I've answered all of the questions. Yeah, okay, perfect. Thanks, Christopher. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. Well, if I don't have any other questions, then I would just like to encourage you to, pick 1 or 2 things and start to make small changes. Remember to give yourself lots of grace. I'm sure that y'all are all doing your very, very best, and you're probably doing better than you're giving yourself credit for. So just remember that we're all in this together, and we're all feeling the stress of the year. And, that is okay. We're human, and it's okay to be stressed. It's just how we respond that we need to focus on. And, again, control what you can control and fix your focus. I really enjoyed it today, guys. I hope y'all have a great one, and roll tide. I'll see y'all next time.